All right, good morning, world. How's everybody doing today? It's a new week. Chattanooga, Tennessee. We got friends listening here from there. Brad's not too far from there, and Ruthie, I think, lives there, and there may be some others, I don't know. But man, it's good to have you guys today. It's going to be a great day. It's a new week. Excited about it for us. It's a short week work-wise. I leave out Wednesday after work, and we're heading up to Ohio, and got a kind of a conference I'm doing up there, and excited about all that and what we're going to learn, what we're going to share. It's going to be good. On the way back, we're going to stop through Nashville, have a birthday party with one of my grandsons, and that's always fun. Church Sunday, and then a wedding Sunday afternoon. So busy week. It was a good weekend, though, right? How was yours? We had a great time. We had a powerful time at church yesterday. Just looking at the power of the Holy Spirit. We baptized 3 people, a young couple, and then a lady who's just been coming to church, came to Christ about 2 weeks ago. So it was a good day yesterday, and all of that. So we're rocking along in the book of Philippians, and if you remember from Friday, we're in Philippians chapter 1, and this is really a book of joy. It's all about, the whole thing is one of the most encouraging books in the scriptures from that perspective. In fact, it often makes me think of silver lining, right? You always have that term. You see one of those clouds, and it's got that little silver lining, and you know that behind that cloud there's this sun, right? And man, we love to see the silver lining kind of thing in life, right? That's an old phrase. I think old people used to use that. There's always a silver lining in everything, meaning there's always this ray of sunshine behind whatever comes our way. And when I think of the book of Philippians, that's what I think about. And so we've been working our way through that. We're going to be in chapter 1, verse 15 today, and kind of excited about what we're going to be looking, where we're going to be sharing, and all of that. So we saw last week, or Friday rather, we're kind of in a series now where Paul goes through a sequence of things about what steals our joy. He doesn't specifically say that, you just see it woven in. Last Friday, we talked about the fact that troubles can't steal our joy. In the middle of all of his troubles, he said, but yeah, I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to rejoice. He always found the silver lining in the midst of everything. And so we asked the question last Friday, what does it take to steal your joy? And so you need to kind of keep visiting that question. What does it take to steal your joy? That's the question that we looked at and we're seeing answered. Ultimately, 2 things can steal our joy. One is our attitude, right? Our mind perspective on life. If we let our eyes drift off of God and who He is and how He's sovereign and He's good, and we begin to see circumstances, joy will begin to slide out the door. We tend often to chase happiness, and happiness is fleeting. Joy is what we're after. And so 2 things steal it. One is just stinking thinking. That's a phrase I used to use in student ministry days ago. Stinking thinking, right? Just a mind perspective of wrong thinking will create a lack of joy. The second thing that will do it is when you allow sin to linger in your life. It too will steal your joy. So we looked last Friday, and we found the reality that he says that he had joy in spite of his troubles. And I'll read that to you real quickly. It's just 3 verses. Now, I want you to know, he says, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. He's going, hey, look, I realize I'm in prison. I got all this stuff. I got guards chained to me and all that. But the upside, the silver lining in this thing is that, man, the gospel's going out. He said, as a result of my being in prison, it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ. He goes, man, the whole world is knowing because these guards that come in and out, being chained to me, hearing the gospel, taking it wherever they go. These are the elite guards. So even Caesar's household has been made aware of the gospel of Christ. He goes, how can I be upset about these chains? Because they're doing so much good. And then he says, because of the change, most of my brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel in fear. He said, hey, my troubles have really spurred people on to be a little more bold about their walk with Christ. And so you see where he was finding joy in the midst of trouble. And so we looked we looked last week about that and just reminded ourselves about our own circumstances? Do we see joy shining through in the midst of those? So that was joy in the midst of troubles. Today, we look at a passage where he's going to talk about joy in the midst of people. How about that one? Joy in the midst of what I call heel grabbers. Uh, those pesky people that kind of want to grab you and kind of hold you back and pull you back and talk about you and all of those things. And Paul says, "Hey man, I'm gonna find joy even in that." Let's read the text and then we'll make some comments about it. He says, "It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry." He's got while I'm in prison, he said, "It's true. I got these people. They're out there preaching out of just sheer jealousy, just envy that." Of me, he says, and kind of my position, and rivalry. There's just this, it's a terrible thing. The ministry is a terrible thing. You find those kind of people in the ministry. And you find it anywhere, really. You've all of us have those pesky people, those people that want to push us down, hold us down, never let anything good happen to us. They want to, if we do, they want to give us a different perspective. They want to talk about us. You have those people, right? They don't get to dictate what goes on in our life. And this is what Paul's saying. Hey, it's true. I got some people out there, and they're preaching simply out of envy of whatever they think that I have because I'm an apostle, and they're envious of that, and so they just want to preach the gospel and try and draw their own crowd. He said there's this rivalry. They just want the top of the heap, that normal thing that happens. But he says, but others are doing it out of goodwill. He says, I got two people in my life. I've got those who are trying to advance the gospel just because they're envious and rivalry, and it's all about that. Wrong motive, terrible motive. But these aren't heretics. These are people who just have terrible motives. But yet they're preaching the same truth that Paul would preach. And then he says the latter do so out of love, those of goodwill. He said you got those who are just trying to take up the slack. They realize Paul's in prison. Hey, let's get after it, right? You love those people, don't you? That kind of just take up the slack and get going. He says the latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. They may recognize Paul's in prison because of the gospel. Somebody's got to pick up the baton and keep this thing going. I'm grateful for people who just pick the baton up and keep going in my life, right? Then he says, the former, they preach Christ out of selfish ambition. They're just hoping to draw a crowd. They just want a big church. They just want to do that. He said, they're not sincerely, supposing they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. He goes, these people aren't preaching it out of just because they sincerely love others. They're just trying to create a crowd, maybe find a paycheck, and stir up trouble for Paul. What a terrible group of people that is. But what does it matter, he says? The important thing, he goes, I don't have time to worry about those people. Those heel grabbers, those pesky people, I don't have time for them. He says, but what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, this is the silver lining, but in every way, whether from false motive, listen, whatever their motive is, Christ is being talked about. And because of this, I rejoice. And you think, and then he goes on, he says, yes, and I will continue to rejoice. I love how he's like getting a nail, man, he's driving it in. Silver lining, right? Hey, I'm in prison. I'm here because I've been preaching the gospel of Christ. I've got those out there that are just trying now to get their own press off of it, and find their own little, empire. And so they're out there and they're doing this stuff and they're trashing me on the process and they're doing all this. But hey, whatever, the gospel's going forth. And then he said, I got those that are doing it for goodwill. I love those people. But he said, I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to rejoice because I'm going to find the silver lining in the midst of everything. Now, so that's kind of the text. It's powerful, isn't it? So what do we make of that? How do we apply that to our own life? And so I think what we have to realize is that there's going to be in all of our lives, there are going to be both of those kind of people. They're going to be those that step up and take up the slack, so to speak. I remember. Ministry's hard, and I've had my detractors. I remember years ago, back in the late '90s, I guess, sitting in a football game with my dad and at that time my two sons, and I got a phone call said that, hey, I just wanted you to know so and so's been calling everybody in the church, telling them you're a heretic and that they're leaving the church. And I'm at a Bama game and I'm looking at like, what is going on? And so, we began to find out, and it was a close friend of mine, and they were hurt about some things and just mad, and so they found something they disagreed with me about, and it got really ugly. I mean, it just got really, really ugly. We've since reconciled all that, but it took a lot of years for that to happen. Um, but in the midst of that, I'm like, man, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? I mean, we grew up together. We're friends, and this kind of thing happened, and somebody kind of joined in with that. You always have those that are going to join in with the naysayers for whatever reason. And this guy was a friend too. I had preached in his church, and he wrote a 56-page dissertation of why I was a heretic, and began to send it by email to everybody on my email list, his email list, and it was crazy. Literally, kind of split the church. And we were just beginning to get going as a church, and good things were happening, and all of that. And so you have a choice. And at that moment, man, I got sidetracked, and I had never gone through depression in my life, but at that moment, I just couldn't get up off the couch. And I'll never forget, had another good friend of mine whom I had taught him how to teach and spent some time in his life. He comes knocking on my door, and he said, "Hey, it is what it is. Are you going to lay on this couch? You're going to get up and lead us." And it was like this wake-up call, right? And I love those people. They come in and pick up the slack, right? I mean, just like we're talking about here. And I realized that God was doing his thing, that he does what he does. I was hurt in that process, and I got involved with the ministry. They were doing prayer, a lot of pastors, Mission Birmingham. And I showed up, and I said, the first person asked me how I'm doing, I'm just going to spill my junk. I'm just going to tell them everything. I sat down next to a guy I hadn't met. He said, "Well, hey, man, how's ministry?" I said, "Man, it's terrible." I told him what happened. And in a matter of a few minutes, he changed everything about my perspective. I told you our perspective is what will ruin our joy, right? So I thought, man, the whole church is collapsing and all this stuff's going on. He said, "Randy," he said, "look," he said, "I've been in ministry a long time." And he said, "God has us and called us as shepherds." And he said, those that you're supposed to shepherd, they can't leave you. And those that you're not supposed to shepherd, they can't stay. And he said, so quit worrying about who comes and goes and just love on the ones that are there. Bam! It was like a light bulb went off, and forever my perspective has changed. I no longer worry about who comes and goes. I mean, I love people, and some are going to come and some are going to go, but in all of that, I'm going to find joy in the midst of those people that are right there in my life in the moment. And I would encourage you to do the same. Friends are going to come and go, right? Then there are going to be those that are going to talk about you on the way out. They're going to have all those. Find the joy in the midst of that. Look at who you do have. And let's celebrate the ones that are here with us. And find the joy in that. And that's how we get by. That's how we get through life. You're always going to have critics. They're always going to be there. We just have to move on. And man, my life is filled with misery in that sense of church. And after we reestablished ourselves and grew further, the church began to grow. It was expanding. Things were going crazy. I began to hire some younger guys to come in and help do ministry. We were a thriving church. And in the midst of that, one of those hill grabbers came in and just began to undermine everything that was going on. And long story short, it was so weird and bad. I thought, you know what, I'm done. And I resigned and started home churching, we called it. And I was done with church. I loved God, but I didn't like church too much. And so we had just decided we're going to home church and not go anywhere. And long story short, I ended up being compelled to go to a church because somebody wouldn't leave me alone from bugging me, and went to church. Then the pastor, kind man, came to me and he said, "Hey man, why don't you join us?" I said, "Man, pastor, if you knew everything that was going on in my life, you what people are out there saying about me, you wouldn't want me around." And he goes, "Listen, you let me worry about them." He said, "You're one of us now." He said, "We got your back." And again, it was like just great confirmation, and God used that to get me back into the ministry, and I've been pastoring ever since. I took a break for just a year, I guess, and then or maybe not even that long, man. We were back in the ministry, but my whole perspective's changed now. I don't struggle. I recognize the hill grabbers, and there's an irritation. There, you get hurt, your feelings are hurt, and all of that. But we find that silver lining in the midst of that. We find that area in our life where we find joy, and we just don't let those people get us down. We move on. We just recognize that God uses people like that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. He uses. He told Paul when he had a thorn in the flesh, messenger of Satan, to buffet his body, and Paul began to pray and say, God, please relieve me of this. 3 seasons of prayer, and God said, I'm not going to do it. My grace is sufficient for you. That's what I want you to learn, Paul. For when you are weak, then I am strong. And so I recognize that when difficult people come into my life, there's joy in the midst of that. Those are the kind of people that will keep us weak so that God can be strong. Those are the kind of people that will remind us that God's grace is sufficient. And so it's a powerful story that we learn just as we kind of meander through this book. And I've enjoyed sharing that with you today. Man, Lord bless you. Hope you have a great week. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. We move into hey, death can't even steal our joy, right? And so, man, it's going to be a great day tomorrow. Be safe today. Be bold out there. I love you, and I'll see you soon.